I would tell them to study the microbiome, that healthy gut bacteria, because it is going to change everything. We are just at the tip of the iceberg, but we are beginning to realize there are certain bacteria that are super, super important that we probably need more of in our body that we might want to supplement into our body. So I'm quite involved in thinking about that. And the biohacking is, how do you measure your gut microbiome? How do you know which healthy bacteria you want to get more of? What foods can nurture them? It's a fascinating area of research. And I encourage anybody who's interested in healthy aging to keep your eye on the gut microbiome.
All right. Well, it's a real pleasure and an honor to have Dr. William Li on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Zara. It's a real pleasure to be asked to be on.
I've been so deep diving into your book, Eat to Beat Disease. Actually, I listened to it. I listened to the audio, and I did this a couple of years ago. And then to prepare for this episode, I went back again, and I keep learning something new. And it's such a great read. I highly recommend everyone to read it. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And you have other books as well. But I've got a ton of questions about food and menopause and all these challenges that women have as we're going through this transition. So I'm wondering, from your research, what do you think are the biggest nutrition levers that women can pull to ease this transition?
It's a big question because menopause is really a huge change in the physiology of our body, of a woman's body, that is just the other end of the bookend, so to speak, of the bookshelf of actually undergoing puberty. So if you remember all the big changes that happen during adolescence, getting you into womanhood, on the other end of the spectrum is really the exit strategy, so to speak, that brings you to a different side of things. I like to position menopause as a very natural state rather than an unnatural state that you have to struggle with. I think too often we present menopause, or women are naturally think of menopause as a struggle. But really, it's a transition, and I think that's important to understand. Now, what does that actually mean when it comes to transition? First of all, it's part of the hard wiring or the operating system of our bodies. So we start the engines, we slow the engines down, other cylinders kick in to help us keep going as we get into sort of our later years. And I think that's just fine. What actually happens during that change in hormones and sort of in that midlife period is actually really amazing, because the change in estrogen and other sex hormones actually alters the way that our metabolism works, or alters the forces that actually act on our hardwired metabolism, and also alters our brain function as well. Now, when I say that, I mean to go back to what I started by saying, which is this is all part of a normal cycle of process. So we sort of need to be able to, I would say, surf with the wave and find out how to take best advantage of our own diet and lifestyle to be able to counter some of those changes. Some of the biggest changes that women notice are changes in weight gain, body shape, energy. That's all related to metabolism and what happens during menopause. And then, of course, some symptomatology like hot flashes, which relate to brain function. Those are other things that often get noticed.
You're right. And actually, yeah, okay. So I think one of the first reels I even saw you make a long time ago was like the top 10 foods to eat to beat disease. And the top one was soy. And when we're going through this transition, I meet a lot of women in my community who add a little soy milk to their coffee, or they're eating soybeans, and they report that they're feeling better, or the hot flashes are less because of those phytoestrogens. So is that still the number one cancer fighting food on your list, or has things changed?
Well, there are so many foods that can help our body fight cancer because we're hardwired, along with our metabolism, with health defense systems that keep us healthy from the time we're born into our last breath. And these 5 health defense systems I wrote about in my book, Eat to Beat Disease, are your circulation, angiogenesis, our stem cells that help us renew from the inside out, our gut microbiome, which many people are beginning to really understand how important it is, our DNA, which protects our aging, our cellular aging process, and our immune system, which plays a much larger role than we ever suspected. These are our health defenses. One of the things to fight cancer is you really want all of these health defenses to be working in your favor. If you activate these health defenses, You can cut off the blood supply to cancer. You can prevent cancer stem cells from growing. You can lower inflammation by having your gut function properly. And a good functioning gut will also raise your immune system. And your immune system function, actually, it's an army of super soldiers that kill invisible cancer cells, whether they're in the breast, the ovary, the uterus, the lungs, colon, wherever they may be. Our immune system actually performs surveillance and knocks out cancer cells in ways that we never even realize in the background. So we want to get all these things sharp. Now, of course, our DNA, eating foods that actually help our DNA protect ourselves, these are antioxidants. These actually help us do DNA repair. These are all things that also help to lower the risk of cancer. So back to soy for a second. It turns out that in the 1980s, there was a discovery made by a Greek researcher working in Switzerland who was studying the urine of Japanese farmers. These are women who worked on Japanese farms, and these were all vegetarians. And in Japan, outside of Kyoto, where the farms are located, these women were eating a huge, highly soy-based diet, and they were all very healthy. And originally, the lab was studying estrogen and progesterone, the sex hormones. But this researcher named Ted Focis actually was really interested in looking what else was in these women's urine who ate a lot of soy. And when he ran the urine under a chromatographic column, which is basically just a kind of a big long test tube that captures all the substances in any fluid like urine, and then shows if there's an unusual spike that's out there that might show some substance, he found that these soy-eating vegetarian women from Japan, these farmers, actually had a spike, a peak, that did not normally occur in humans. And it was a plant-based spike, and it came from soy. And the soy peaks, which included genistein, diazine, equal, these are the natural bioactives that are found in soy foods, so soybeans. We're talking edamame, we're talking about tofu, we're talking about all the hundreds of different forms that soy can actually occur. These were eaten by the women, they were metabolized throughout the body, and they were finally excreted in the urine. So that was the first indication that the natural plant-based substances of soy would actually make it throughout the body. This was, remember, the mid-1980s, one of the first types of evidence I cite as food as medicine. Now, what this researcher did, he was a cancer researcher, he did something really amazing. He took the spike that came out from soybeans and he purified the stuff out of it. So it turned out to be genistein. It's spelled Genistein, genistein. And he tested it on human blood vessels, the same kind of blood vessels that might grow to feed breast cancer. So cancers are normally harmless in our body. A lot of people don't realize this, but we've got 40 trillion cells in our body. And they all have to divide, meaning they have to copy and paste themselves, which is why we're going to be around tomorrow compared to today, and why we're still here today compared to yesterday. Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Okay, just like a word processing document. And our cells copy each other. Well, when this normal process of copying happens, the body will occasionally make a mistake. And when a mistake is made in copying a cell, that is what we call a mutation. And mutations actually are the root cause of the formation of cancer. So think about it. If I asked you, Zora, to copy a sentence, let's just say Mary had a little lamb, and I asked you to copy it down on a laptop 10 times, you'd do it perfectly. If I asked you to do it 100 times, you're probably going to have a typo or two. Fortunately, we have a spell check, and that can correct it. If I asked you to copy it like the human body copies cells 40 trillion times, I guarantee you're going to make mistakes. And even with a spell checker, it's not going to catch everything. So an interesting thing about human cancer that a lot of people don't realize, and this is as true for women in menopause in the second half of life, where they are as vulnerable to the same cancers as men, except that they have a uterus, if you haven't had a hysterectomy, and an ovary, and you have breasts as well. Okay, but every other cancer you're still equally at risk for. How many mistakes do you think, Zora, the human body makes copying and pasting itself every 24 hours?
Oh,
Take a guess, wild guess.
I don't know, millions, if not
I will
trillions.
tell you many, many mistakes. All right.
Yeah.
But the good news is the body has these repair mechanisms,
Yeah.
spell checks that will fix the spelling errors. However, the body misses about 10,000 typos in its copy paste every day. It misses them. And so those wind up becoming 10,000 little microscopic cancers that are littered throughout our body. So every day we're forming these little tiny microscopic cancers that will never hurt us until they are allowed to grow. Now, our immune system naturally conducts surveillance like an army of super soldiers, cops on a beat, driving around our body, in our bloodstream, and our tissues, looking for trouble. And that's why we want to have good, strong immunity. So when we talk to people who are vibrant and active, who want longevity, one of the things you absolutely need to have is good, strong immunity. Immunoaging, which is what happens as we get older, our immune system starts to get a little fussy and weaker. Not a good thing. We want to do everything possible, and this is where diet comes in. However, let me just tell you, our immune system will circle around looking for these little microscopic mistakes that are made, and it'll gobble them right up. And so those 10,000 mistakes become no problem at all. Now, sometimes these little microscopic cancers will grow. And as they're growing up, they will grow, grow, grow until they get to about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. That's the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. All
Mm.
right, or a small grain of rice. And then it can't get any bigger because guess what? That microscopic cancer does not have a blood supply. So without a blood supply, the cancer can't grow. So what do these tumors do? Well, they try to send out natural fertilizers to hijack our body's blood vessels to see if they can trick some blood vessels to grow towards them. That's a process called tumor, as in cancer, angiogenesis. And that's what I study, angio, blood vessel, genesis, how they grow. So one of the ways our body tries to prevent cancer from growing, besides the immune system, is to naturally prevent blood vessels from growing into a tumor. Natural blood vessel control, healthy angiogenesis. No, not to the tumor, please. Like in an airplane, we now lock the cockpit door. You can't get in there. That's what our body tries to do. Now, sometimes these cancers are really smart and can trick the body, so we can still get those blood vessels to grow. So what do foods like soy do? Turns out this is exactly what that researcher Ted Fotzis did. He took that substance found in the urine of the women who ate a lot of soy and in a vegetarian diet, and he tested it on those tumor blood vessels. And guess what the soy did? Completely cut off the blood vessels growing that would normally grow towards the cancer. Capable of starving a cancer by cutting off the blood supply. Anti-angiogenesis. It opposes the ability to feed a cancer by starving the cancer. So this is what I've written about before. Soy being thought erroneously to be harmful for breast cancer. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Women who eat more soy not only actually feel better from a menopause perspective, but they actually have a lower risk they have a better survival from breast cancer, lower risk of breast cancer, and lower recurrence from breast cancer as well. And this is done, there was a big study called the Shanghai Women's Breast Cancer Study that showed that in 5,000 women, those women at the highest risk for breast cancer, that means that they already had breast cancer, had a 30% reduction in mortality if they ate more soy. So I want to put to rest this urban legend that women should stay away from soy, because quite the opposite, they should eat more soy. And by the way, in Asia, which is a huge area of consumption for soy products, and not just firm tofu at a salad bar like we see over here in the West, so many different types of soy. The reality is that in Asia, women with breast cancer are absolutely not discouraged from eating soy. So again, this is one of these things where there is kind of like this belief system in food that once you hear something, you actually try to keep going with it. I want to say one more thing about soy and breast cancer, because it's such an important myth to bust. All right. And I love to basically take Thor's hammer and just like whip it right at these urban legends that exist. Okay. So where did this legend of soy being harmful to women come from? Well, there's a lot of these urban legends floating out there, like lectins in tomatoes and nightshades and all that kind of stuff. I know we can talk about those if you like as well. But for soy, I like to think about it as people who come up with these ideas are well-intentioned. Okay, not everyone's a doctor or a scientist. I happen to be both. I think somebody realized that there is a phytoestrogen found in soy, and this is genistein and some of these other substances we've been discussing. And they also knew that some forms of human breast cancer are highly stimulated, sensitive to estrogens. So they naturally, with good intention, thought that the estrogen, the phytoestrogen in soy might be bad for women with estrogen sensitive breast cancer. Well intentioned, okay? Put one and one together to try to come up with an explanation. However, this is where it helps to be a scientist. If you look at the chemical structure of a phyto, meaning plant-based estrogen, okay, write it on a blackboard. You can write all those chemical symbols out, and then draw human estrogen right next to it, chemical structure, draw it all out. You'll see they don't look the same. And in fact, it turns out that the soy estrogen blocks the human estrogen. It's kind of like Mother Nature's tamoxifen, which is what we prescribe every day to block human estrogen for some forms of breast cancer. So, well-intentioned person, right idea, wrong conclusion. And this is where the details of the science of nutrition, of food as medicine, make a big difference. So that's what I do. I'm I'm up to my gills trying to figure out like what it is in our food that actually works and what is it that we believe, but actually the science doesn't hold it up. And so we can clear things up and we don't have to be as afraid of our food. We can embrace our food and love it in order to be able to love our health.
Oh, I love this explanation. I have so much to unpack here. In this podcast, we love to debunk things, and I hate fear mongering at food. It just drives me nuts. In fact, I'm so glad you gave this really thorough explanation. And in your book, actually, we could have totally started there anyways, but you go really deep into what is angiogenesis and how does DNA get repaired, and you give us the cliff notes kind of to this. But it is really important. So I'm glad you explained that. And a lot of people don't realize, yeah, we've got cancer cells. Everyone got cancer cells floating around or potential, right, to grow. And like you said, we don't want to give the blood supply so that it can grow. And what you've proven is that there are foods that can block that from happening. And then there are foods that can actually feed and create angiogenesis with things that we do want to grow and rejuvenate, repair, and all these things. And that's what's so fascinating about your book is that I like it because we can eat things. It's not so much like what we can't eat, it's what we can. And soy, I used to live in Hong Kong and I see how people eat there. And I ate soy and everybody's eating soy and we're eating edamame. We're eating the whole beans. We're eating soy bean sprouts. We're not eating tofu burgers. We're not quite doing it the same as in the West. I mean, when I say we, I mean when I was in Asia. And so I think people, that's part of the missing piece too. When people say, oh, that's just junk food, that soy processed stuff. And I'm like, no, actually, people are eating it very different.
We should take a moment to talk about this because I think it's really important, which is the difference between soy in its natural state and in its sort of food states versus ultra processed soy, because I think that's really another area that people get confused about. Naturally, you just pointed out that when you lived in Hong Kong, you saw hundreds of different ways that soy is actually eaten. You can steam sheets of soy, you have soy noodles, you actually have soy beans, you have soy paste, you've got fermented soy, all kinds of different, actually really delicious ways you can actually have soy. And soy is actually having tofu with soy sauce on it. And so, again, there's so many delicious ways. It's a very umami flavor that soy actually has, which makes it really delicious. But that kind of soy food, whether it's edamame you get at a Japanese restaurant, sushi bar, or whether it's I could go to a dim sum restaurant and you find all these different ways of having soy. Or you know what? Honestly, I tell people, go to the grocery store and buy some tofu, comes in a prepared canister, just slice it up. You don't have to put it into a salad. You can easily just saute it in a pan to heat it up and add whatever flavors or seasoning you want to make it really delicious. And by the way, there's even soy breakfast. In Hong Kong, I'm sure you've had the soy milk, warm soy milk. with the
Yep.
crullers, and you
Yep.
also have this like steamed soy. Point is, those are all food soy preparations.
Hmm.
They're all healthy for you. And the fermented ones are even probiotic as well. So
Hmm.
you get some extra along with it. Okay, that is generally speaking the healthy form of soy. You go to kind of the West. I'm just going to use America, which is where we're both from, and what kind of soy that most people who might be listening who live in America are used to. You're used to seeing soy as a filler in other foods. So, exactly the foods that we tell you not to go for, which is the ultra processed foods in the middle aisle of the grocery store, maybe even in a frozen section. And you look at the ingredient label. This is what I tell everyone to do. Please, whatever you're buying that's in a package, in a can, or a bag, all right, that comes from a factory, please look at the ingredient label because you just want to be a savvy consumer to make sure you know what you're putting into your body. And oftentimes you'll see soy filler material in there because soy adds bulk. But this kind of soy is not the type that we were talking about that is eaten in Asia. This kind of soy is milled and ground and chemically changed and integrated with other filler material and then just used to create bulk in food. That is not the kind of soy that is healthy for you. In fact, that's an ultra processed type of soy and probably not good for you, particularly because it's lost its natural state. Okay. And it's most likely mixed with other chemicals that are going to be damaging to your health defenses, including your gut microbiome and including your DNA defenses, and maybe even causing inflammation as well. So, this is why what I always say is that God is in the details.
Hmm.
All right. And we just can't black and white and try to pigeonhole entire categories of food by saying good versus bad. This doesn't work that way. Try to be specific about what it is that we're talking about.
It goes to say for so many things when we talk about hormones and estrogen is different. The equine estrogen is different than bioidentical estradiol or progestins versus progesterone, and they all get lumped into one pack of people just demonizing these things when actually are very different. It's like organic strawberries versus the organic jelly bellies, like strawberry jelly bellies. It's like very different.
Things that we once thought were bad, even in the medical community. So you and I are both medically trained. Things that when we were in med school were taught to us as medical students as not good. It's a belief system about when it comes to food, sometimes based on the best evidence and interpretation of the evidence of the day, wind up later on having new evidence that makes everyone change their mind. I think estrogen is one of those topics where it was a miracle. Oh no, now it's really terrible. Oh, actually, maybe not so bad after all, depending on what type you take. But when it comes to food, think about the things that we were taught. Eggs, terrible for you, raises your cholesterol. All cholesterol is bad. Actually, that's not really the case. Oh, it causes more heart disease. Well, back then, they didn't realize that people they were studying who were eating eggs were also having bacon and having butter on their toast and having cream in their coffee. And I think that the nice thing about science is that it continues to evolve our knowledge. And this is why I always tell people, look, even talking or listening to a conversation like the one we're having now, you got to realize we are trying to give the best possible explanation based on what's known now. But research is important because it will actually continue to peel back the layers of the onion. And sometimes the thing that we really thought were true, when you get a little bit deeper, you find out some new information that might cause us to switch our interpretation a little bit.
Mhm.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that because women often ask me, should I take hormones or not take hormones? I get it. Do I take this decision? Do I not take this decision? And I kind of explained the same, like what we knew then is different now. However, what we know now may change as well. So
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, you got to make a decision to take this or not take this and then deal with the consequences. And I think the problem is death and disease are not an option. Like we're not allowed that, forget it. And so people want 100% guarantee with their health or their choices. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, there is no 100% guarantee other than death at some point. And I think if we can understand that, it may help us make
Well,
decisions easier.
and this comes to something really important, I think, when it comes to longevity, when it comes to dealing with the symptoms and the fallout from a life change like menopause. And it's really that medicine at its best, health and wellness in all of its forms, is highly personalized. What might work for one person really well might not work so well, or might not even work at all for another person, and that's okay. I think that this is where individualized attention to what works for you as an individual is the most important thing. And the great news is that, look, if you can find somebody to guide you, all right, you can try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't work for you, try something else. You fine tune it. That's actually the whole way, I think, of personalizing medicine. Make it work for you as an individual. Don't just try to generalize. And again, back at looking in the retrospectoscope, for those of us who are trained physicians, the way that we were trained is that one size fits all. We were taught that here's an antibiotic and here's the dose. And it's good for men and women and young and old. And if you have a big body or a small body, it's all the same. You should just prescribe the same thing. Man, were we wrong. Okay. Now we know that you really need to tailor everything to the individual circumstance. And that's really how we advance in our ability to care for our patients, if you're a doctor, but also ourselves, because we can tailor things for ourselves. I think it's the best possible way to be accountable, is to say, my body, my preferences, my circumstances are going to be different from other people. So how do I find the best solution for me?
I like that. You're talking about personalized medicine, and I'm in the biohacking space as well. And I love that because biohackers understand we're all bio-individual. I don't care what the research says. If it's not working with you, it doesn't work with you. It's okay. You may be
Yeah.
an outlier. There are outliers in research, right? So my question then to you is, it's how many doctors out there, or what do you think is the consensus in terms of how many doctors really are personalizing their protocols for their patients nowadays?
This is an area of evolution in modern medicine. Even though we've been talking about personalized medicine for a couple of decades now, only now are, I think, there are more physicians that are putting their actions, their words into action. So too few people today are practicing personalized, individualized medicine. Listen, you need to have a little bit of science to be able to guide you. A lot of doctors, I mean, and this is something that patients I don't think really appreciate. We doctors are trained to practice cookbook medicine, frankly. You got to memorize things and just do it over and over and over again. And then when you got a lot of patients lined up in the waiting room, you just slam them out. Copy paste, kind of like we were talking about before. And obviously that falls way short of what we can do for the individual. So if you're one of those people who feel so frustrated after going to the doctor, I'm not getting the result that I want, I'm not feeling a lot better, don't just blame the doctor, but really get your doctor to try to individualize the attention to what it is that you need. And I love the fact that you talked about the fact that you're in the biohacker space. Biohacking is kind of a trendy term, but what it really means is that you're just trying to measure on an individual basis what's going on in your body. And once you know that, you can actually get an idea. I mean, here's something very simple. You have some burning when you urinate. Well, measure your urine, see if you have a bladder infection. If you do, take some cranberry juice, maybe take some antibiotics, exercise, lower your stress, and you'll recover from it. It's very simple, but you got to measure. If you don't measure, you're not going to really know. And this is why I come back to something I said earlier, which is that we are in the position to be much more precise at the individual level than we ever were in the past.
Yeah, it's something I think people need to take a little bit of accountability, not accountability, but they have to advocate for themselves and bring, I always say that the doctor's there to help you, is trying to guide you. They don't know you. Like, you know yourself better. And if you can, women in menopause, like, track your symptoms, bring it in a tracker, tell it this is what's happening. And it does help guide the doctor to help you a little bit more. So sometimes we need to be a little bit proactive, test, measure, and assess. That's like a biohacking favorite. And I love doing that. If you can bring in data, I think that helps, along with some symptoms, and talk about what's bothering you the most, and you'll get there. And that's the way to help your doctor help you personalize that. So I do want to go back to the soy, though, because you mentioned the lectins, or gluten and all these things. That's you probably got a lot of pushback on that because you talk about tomatoes and that's being really great for you. But then when you have these people who like, well, what about the lectins? Let's say we can talk a bit about that, or they've got gut issues and they can't, I don't know, process certain foods, or diabetic and they can't eat fruit and fruit is so good for you. How do you explain some of these things? Because it sounds like there's a trade-off.
Yeah, so let's back up for 1 second to talk about the fact that foods are more than nourishment to provide energy in our body. They are that. It's very important for our metabolism, and we can talk about that in the context of menopause as well. But in addition to the nourishment, the energy, the calories that the food that we supply our body with, they also supply us with other really important beneficial substances. If you look at the plant-based world, if you look at some forms of seafood, I mean, pretty much what we're eating that comes from nature, whatever form it is, will actually have something beneficial. In the case of plant-based foods, we're talking about fruits and vegetables and nuts and legumes. You wind up having bioactives. We call them bioactives because they're natural chemicals like polyphenols, which everyone's been hearing about everywhere. And when you eat those, they don't give you energy, but what they do is they provide a different type of fuel in our body. Those polyphenols can activate our body's health defenses. They help our circulation get better. They help our stem cells work better so we can repair ourselves and regenerate ourselves better. They feed our gut microbiome. If you heard of the term prebiotic, a polyphenol is a prebiotic. It's kind of like fish food for your gut microbiome. You're giving kibble to your healthy gut bacteria, and dietary fiber will do the same thing. They're antioxidants. They help our body protect the DNA. The errors and mistakes that are made that get missed by the spell checker, hey, helps your spell checker work much more efficiently. And also many polyphenols lower inflammation, which is very important because we all recognize, by the way, speaking of inflammation, people call inflammation the root cause of disease. I agree with that, but I have maybe a more refined look at this. Inflammation is your body's response to stress of any sort. And if you have enough stress, the inflammation doesn't go away. It's supposed to spark up and go away. If you don't put if you never lower the stress to your body, could be an infection, could be a tumor, could be a harmful substance you're ingesting, that inflammation becomes chronic. And it's because of the chronic inflammation that all the other systems and health defenses start to break down. And once your defenses break down, it's like your shields come down. Now the enemies at the gate can start marching in. And that's basically how diseases come. So I wouldn't really call inflammation as the definition of inflammation is the root cause of disease. I would say inflammation is actually a normal thing that in excess can set you up for diseases to actually sort of run wild in your body. You can't then tame them quite as easily.
That low grade chronic inflammation, I think, which is
yeah.
Chronic is there for a reason.
Yeah. And by the way, so many things can set up chronic low-grade inflammation. I mean, obviously, if you eat a lot of ultra-processed foods and you're having a lot of artificial coloring and flavoring and preservatives, many people are super sensitive to that. Some artificial sweeteners sometimes can also cause low-grade inflammation. When you knock out your gut microbiome, which is what some artificial sweeteners do, those healthy bacteria are naturally lowering inflammation by releasing their own short-chain fatty acids into your blood. So you knock out some of those good bacteria, now you don't have as much anti-inflammation and your inflammation levels start to go up. All right, you don't have the volume switch turning it down. Now it's just loud music everywhere, and it gets louder when your inflammation gets worse. But I want to actually talk about the complexity of some of these polyphenols or dietary fiber or lectins. Okay, so these are all natural parts of food. Again, lectins are found in tomatoes, as an example, and some well-known figures on social media have been talking about lectins for some time now and saying, ooh, it's dangerous to have lectins. They're very toxic. Okay, so this is where I've got to step in as a scientist. I study blood vessels in the lab. In the lab, in order to look at blood vessels, we have lab techniques that look at lectins. So I know a lot about lectins. Okay, and here's the thing that I want to pull the cloak back and expose the urban legend. There are hundreds and hundreds of lectins that are out there in Mother Nature. Some of them are very toxic. just not the ones in tomatoes. Okay.
Really?
So somebody who's well intentioned, like the soy story and the phytoestrogens, I want to give people the credit. Like they had an idea, right idea, wrong conclusion. The lectins found in tomatoes are harmless. Now, I want to tell you, the human body is also packed with lectins. Lectins in our body actually hold our tissues together. We didn't have lectins ourselves, our body would fall apart. It'd be like a brick wall with no grout in between. The bricks would just all fall down. All right. So good thing we've got lectins, and tomatoes are totally fine to eat. I want to talk about tomatoes because there's another urban legend that I really want to be able to crush
Bring it
with
on.
my fist right now. Okay. And I write about this in my book. So not only do tomatoes have this sort of the boogeyman of lectins, which is totally not true. Tomatoes have many health benefits. They help your metabolism. They help you burn harmful visceral body fat. They improve your blood glucose. They cut off the blood supply to cancer. They lower your risk of both breast and prostate cancer, lower your risk of breast and prostate cancer. Why or how? By cutting off the blood supply, feeding little microscopic breast and prostate cancer. Has been studied in humans. All right. So tomatoes are perfectly safe. More importantly, I love tomatoes. I like to cook with tomatoes, and they're totally fine. Now, somebody else, there's also been accompanying the tomato mythology, false mythology, that tomatoes are toxic because they belong to the nightshade family of plants. Okay, so there's a little history in about this as well. And I think that like I'm a little bit of a history geek, and when I study food, not only do I try to study the present and future of food, I'm really interested in what's the origin story of food. Zora, you know where tomatoes came from originally, right?
China?
Do you know?
I don't
No,
know.
they came from Latin America.
Oh, okay.
The Spanish
We all.
conquistadors actually were exploring. They had their patrons. They went got in their ships. They were exploring Peru and all these other places, and they saw these amazing plants with these round fruits, which is what tomatoes are. It's a fruit. They're on vines. Never seen them before in Europe. And as a parting gift, the local natives would give a bunch of vines containing these beautiful golden orbs on them. And those are the first tomatoes that the Spaniards brought back to Europe, Southern Europe, Italy and Spain, to be able to, as a gift, back to their patrons. Well, thank you for sending us on our trip. We want to present you a prize that we found, a gift that we found, and it was these vines with these golden orbs on it. Now, I say golden orbs because original tomatoes were not red like think of them today. They were more golden. And of course, in the grocery store, the farmer's market, you see golden tomatoes now. Well, back then, the Europeans that were exploring Spain, they were like, I have no idea what this fruit is. Looks kind of like an apple. Word for apple being pomme, Pomme, and it's gold. So the word for gold is oro, right? So pomodoro, apple of gold, all right, is what they called pomodoro. And hence we now know pomodoro sauce, tomatoes, the Italian word for tomatoes, pomodoro, right? So
You said that in the book. I totally forgot.
yeah,
You
but the
bring me back.
reason I'm going to bring one more thing back to you, the interesting thing. So, look, now we understand how the tomato got its name originally, right? So that helps us when we understand something, Zara. It demystifies things. It makes things feel more comfortable, and I think that's part of what your podcast does is to really try to bring understanding to demystify some of these complicated or confusing things. So now I'm not done busting this tomato myth yet. Okay, how are tomatoes toxic? Well, I'll tell you, when these beautiful golden orbs, golden apples got brought back to Europe, the patrons were really curious about them, so they wanted to display them as objets d'art. So they placed them on trays and displayed them to their guests, their house guests. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Where did you get that? Well, the people we sent to Latin America actually brought them back for us. Amazing. All right. So they put them on these pewter trays. Okay. Now, up until about the 1900s, pewter was made from lead,
Hmm.
had a high concentration of lead. And tomatoes are acidic, and any acid food will leach lead from the platter and put the lead into the tomato. So you can get lead poisoning in the early days from just displaying the tomato. Now, that was one of the reasons that the tomatoes had this kind of like blackened reputation about being toxic. The other thing, now where did this nightshade thing come from? Oh, by the way, so what did the wealthy people did? When they, next time they got a bunch of tomatoes, they're like, "Ah, we're not going to eat these." They tossed them out the window where they rolled down to the peasant's yard, never having touched pewter,
Yeah.
and then they just grew in the peasant's yard, and that's why tomato foods are often peasant foods. And guess what? The peasants didn't have enough money to have a pewter lead tray. So what this when they ate it, they never got toxic. All right. So again, understanding a little bit about the history helps us clear things up in our head. Now, what about this nightshade thing? So nobody in Europe knew what the tomato plant was. They hadn't seen it. Didn't grow naturally in Europe. So they cut the leaves off and they sent them to Oxford in England, where to botanists to say, the heck is this? And the botanists were looking at these leaves and they were really unique. And so they searched and compared in their drawers of all the different kinds of leaves that are out there. And the closest ones they got were to nightshades, the nightshade.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, let's just call it a nightshade then.
Mhm.
All right. So today we call it solanaceae. All right. Now, here's the thing about nightshade. It is true that there is a toxic nightshade, two toxic nightshades, by the way, but there are 1,000 different nightshade plants that are out there. Only two of them are toxic. And one of them, the belladonna plant, actually makes atropine, which we use in medicine. So, so this is where, and then so they sent back, they're like, well, we think it's people in England sent it back saying, well, we think it's a nightshade. All right. And so that's how you get this nightshade connection to toxins, connected to lectins, connected to toxicity. Throw all that away. All right. I want you to just put that in the trash and delete. Tomatoes are a healthy source of vitamin C. They're a great source of hydration. They're a good source of a carotenoid called lycopene. And when you cook tomatoes, you change the chemical structure of this natural lycopene under heat, okay, into a form that your body loves to absorb. So you get a more active form of the beneficial lycopene that lowers your risk of cancer by cutting off the blood supply and improving your body's ability to burn fat, okay, which is a beneficial thing. And because lycopene is fat soluble, meaning it likes to dissolve in oil, the best way to get the benefits of lycopene from a cooked tomato is to cook it with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil.
Mm.
Now your body will really absorb that. So anybody who enjoys Mediterranean cuisine, you're in luck, because that combination of tomatoes and extra virgin olive oil gives you much more potent versions of lycopene plus the polyphenols from your olive oil that can actually help improve your health defenses overall.
Right. Okay, I'm getting hungry now. This reminds me, my mother-in-law is French Moroccan. And I remember when she was cooking and I was observing, she would peel and deseed tomatoes, peel, deseed cucumbers. These are nightshades. She would pressure cook beans. So these are sort of ancient practices, I'm guessing, but I think she said it was because certain people in the family were sensitive or they had stomach issues. And what do you know about people who do these practices?
Yeah.
And is it
Back to
necessary for us to do it?
Back to the individualization of individuals to food. Sure. First of all, if you peel a tomato, you'll get a much more homogeneous tomato sauce out of it. The peels can actually have that. So, are some people sensitive to tomato skins? Sure. I mean, some people are actually allergic to tomatoes. And so again, this individualization that's really important. If you're eating a food that's supposed to be good for you, because science tells us and we know from clinical human studies that it's good for us, but it doesn't agree with you, stay away from it. You got a lot of other choices to have. Same thing with the beans. Sure, traditional ways of cooking, they didn't have the science, but they had this intuitiveness, this experience. That's why I think that this resurgence, one of the biggest things that you can do for your own health. I don't care if what your background is or where you are in your life. If you haven't been cooking, but now you want to actually take your health to that next level so you can have healthy aging. One of the most important things you can do is, besides biohacking, is actually to learn how to cook and cook for yourself, because then you become the captain of your own destiny. You can actually control exactly what you're putting in your body and for things that actually will agree with you, and you'll stay away from the things that don't agree with you.
It's such common sense that some people, I think, completely forget. You shouldn't eat this because it's going to do that. I don't know. If you feel bad, don't eat it. I mean, I don't care how good it is for you, or vice versa.
Right.
So, thank you for bringing common sense again. But I want to go back to the tomatoes, because one thing that was so interesting that I learned from you in the book was the lycopene in tomatoes. And there was also, you mentioned red grapefruit and watermelon juice, I think. When you take these or drink these, tomato juice, for example, before you have a trip in a flight or a radiation, I'm thinking like mammograms or something, you have research that you presented that showed if you take it 1 hour before, you can offset some of the DNA damage, but not if you take it after. Do you remember that research?
Yeah, it's amazing. Who hasn't looked forward to going out to the beach or going out on a sunny day to just enjoy the sunshine, right? And that's something we all look forward to. But when you go out there and on a hot day with a lot of bright sunshine, especially if you're going to lay out on the beach for a while, you're getting a lot of ultraviolet radiation. Totally natural. Except that if you get a lot of it, it's going to actually damage your DNA. Don't worry, your body's got the spell check system, is going to fix some of the problems. Won't catch them all, but it'll catch a lot of them. And so what can you do to help your body protect itself against DNA damage? Well, it turns out that the lycopene that's actually found in tomatoes and red colored foods, including watermelon, actually can be protective. And we put sunscreen on our skin to protect our skin so we don't look leathery. That's from the outside. And look, let's all admit it, like slathering on, if you really want to do sunscreen properly, you'd slather on, you would look pretty bad because you'd be covered with this white cream. Most of us keep on rubbing it and they can't see it anymore. And it's not as protective as we think it is. However, a little trick that research has told us is that if you eat lycopene a couple of hours before you go out into the sunshine, you put the lycopene in your bloodstream, and the lycopene, which protects DNA, protects your cells from the inside out. It's like sunscreen inside your body in your circulation that protects you under the skin. It's like we can't put sunscreen on like that. We can put sunscreen. You should put sunscreen on for sure. But but having a couple of slices of watermelon or a glass of tomato juice for a couple of hours before you go out to the sun will actually protect your cells. Now, what's interesting is that after the damage has occurred, it doesn't work as well. So you really want to be able to get the protective. It's a protector, not a fixer. And that's the key thing. It protects us against damage. So think about it. Before you go out, have a couple of slices of watermelon in the summertime, have a cup of tomato juice or have a tomato salad. That research reminded me of when I was doing research in the Mediterranean. I was in Greece. And for anybody who's been to Greece, these incredible Greek islands with these incredible beaches, it's just a very relaxing, gorgeous place to go with lots of healthy, it's very elemental. So the food is really elemental. Well, what do you have before you go out to the beach? You have a Greek salad, cut tomatoes, olive oil, cucumbers, really fresh, wholesome food. A slice of watermelon, karpouzi, that's what they call it in Greece. Amazing. So again, tradition figured out something that science is now giving us the explanation for. And we don't need to go buy a super expensive device to be able to help us protect ourselves. I think let's start with the simple things that we can all get access to.
You're right. Actually, this reminded me of the molecule astaxanthin, which also works to protect the skin from the inside out. Do you know the differences, or have you heard of astaxanthin?
So astaxanthin is a very interesting molecule. Here we are talking about genistein, lycopene, astaxanthin. For most people, they're tongue twisters, unless you are into talking about food as medicine or longevity. But don't worry if you can't pronounce it really well. You can look it up. Astaxanthin is a tongue twister. Astaxanthin is an interesting thing because it is actually found in the shells of seafood. So it is actually what makes lobsters turn red when you cook them, or shrimp turn red when they're actually cooked. And that turns out that natural substance, which originally comes from plankton, by the way, astaxanthin. So the lobsters and the shrimp, they eat that stuff, and they're vegetarians too, right? So they're eating the plankton in the sea. At the end of the day, it's the plant-based foods that animals eat, that we actually get some of the good stuff as well, or we can eat the plants directly. That actually has also a antioxidant DNA protecting effect as well. So astaxanthin is a really interesting substance. People talk about, well, can we just get a supplement? And I'll just down a whole bunch of supplements. Sure, you can. My advice to people about supplements, because I take some supplements, I believe in supplements, is first think about what the word supplement means. It means to top off. What you should eat, that you can get most of the micronutrients and macronutrients that you need from your diet if you just took the time to choose things that work for you personally, that are good for you. And then whatever you can't get enough of, sure, take a supplement to top yourself off. That's the best way the healthiest way, the most economically efficient way, actually, to think about dietary supplements as well. And so there are some foods that are more difficult to get from your diet at adequate amounts. Vitamin D is one of those. Omega-3s, it's hard to get a lot from your diet. You can, but it's hard to get enough of them. So those are kind of no-brainers. And then the whole area of probiotics is so fascinating to me, because if I were advising a young person who wants to go into medical research on a field that they should study, that I could point them to, guide them to study, that's going to change everything. That's, what young medical students are always interested in. Like, what can I get involved with that's going to be world changing? I would tell them to study the microbiome, that healthy gut bacteria, because it is going to change everything. We are just at the tip of the iceberg, but we are beginning to realize there are certain bacteria that are super, super important that we probably need more of in our body, that we might want to supplement into our body. So I'm quite involved in thinking about that. And the biohacking is, how do you measure your gut microbiome? How do you know which bugs, which healthy bacteria you want to get more of? What foods can nurture them? It's a fascinating area of research. And I encourage anybody who's interested in healthy aging to keep your eye on the gut microbiome. In fact, by the way, sorry, that in the longevity space, there's like a dozen different hallmarks of longevity that people are looking at. Cool. It tells us a lot about aging, the biology of aging. My research in this space, I'm looking at healthy aging and longevity. I'm interested in the human side. What have we found in people? Okay, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens in a fruit fly or a roundworm or a lab mouse. What matters is what happens in people. And I was amazed when my great uncle, my father's uncle, turned 100, okay, and he was completely intact. He planned his own centenarian birthday party. He invited his own guests. He chose the menu. It was really amazing. And I went to it and I thought, my gosh, my own family member turned 100. It is possible. And he was intact. All right. Sharp in mind. He could have good eyesight. He literally hosted this party himself. And then he lived to 104.
Wow.
Okay. Intact. Now, so there is something really interesting when you look at people who are super agers. These are people who live to 104 and older. And the most interesting thing to me is what they're finding in the gut microbiome. There are bacteria found at high levels in people who are super agers that are not found in people at high levels in people who don't make it quite as long. So for my own research now, I'm really diving into that to try to understand better what it is that we can understand about gut health and ultra longevity.
I love that. We need a whole other episode for this because I have like 10 billion more questions for you, but we're going to have to wrap it up. But I would love to have a part two if you're open for that. But I do have one question that was asked by one of our members, and she said, please ask Dr. William Li about coffee and coffee. So we talked about soy, tomatoes, and you do talk about coffee and the benefits. She was concerned about mold. And is it true that most coffee has mold and we should be concerned about it? Or is just all the coffee that's been tested in your research, it's just normal coffee? I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So this is a much longer conversation, but I want to sort of try to boil it down to the most important points. Most coffee you can get commercially, or especially if you get it if you have a favorite coffee shop and that roasts their own beans or whatever. There's real coffee aficionados. I've got friends who They call themselves coffee snobs. They pick and choose their beans and totally fine. Okay. Just fine to have, just fine to drink. And here's the reason. There are lots and lots of healthy bioactives that are found in the coffee bean, and including polyphenols. One of the most important polyphenols is called chlorogenic acid, which is really high levels in the coffee bean. And by the way, if you get organic coffee beans, they're going to be higher levels of chlorogenic acid than in conventionally grown coffee. I'm not telling you to go out to buy organic necessarily, but this has been a kind of a general rule of thumb, is that the plants naturally create these polyphenols to heal themselves as their own health defenses. Chlorogenic acid repels insects, for example. So if you don't actually grow with pesticides, guess what? You got a little more bugs and bees nibbling away at the stems and the leaves of the coffee plant. Guess what? It's going to defend itself by making more chlorogenic acid. So that's true for coffee, strawberries, tomatoes, etc. So what's interesting, however, is that chlorogenic acid cuts off the blood supply to tumors, lowers the risk of some cancers. Chlorogenic acid also helps your metabolism helps your body burn off excess body fat, which is something that a lot of women who are in menopause really are motivated to try to do. How do I get my figure to be a little bit better? My metabolism is shifting. How do I burn off extra body fat? Coffee is actually one of those things. By the way, if you're going to drink coffee, it's best to the highest polyphenol levels are medium roast. Dark roast actually starts to degrade some of the polyphenols. Although I personally like the taste of dark roast. Medium roast is where you get the higher levels of polyphenols. So it's a matter of taste, the personalization, what your goals are. It's totally fine to have dark roast. You're just going to get a little bit more polyphenol with a medium roast. Organic beans are going to have more. And if you're going to drink your coffee, please do not put artificial sweetener in it, okay, because that's going to damage your gut microbiome. And if you actually put dairy in it, now listen, when I was in med school, I drank a ton of coffee. I don't know if you did, and we put cream or milk or whatever it is that was around the hospital into the coffee, and it tasted fine. But here's what we know, that the dairy fat, animal fat, actually will form little soap bubbles, we call them micelles, around the polyphenols, like chlorogenic acid. So if you actually put cream in your coffee, or milk in your coffee, or half and half in your coffee, all right, what'll happen is that you'll form little soap bubbles around the polyphenols, and you'll drink it. It's fine. The soap bubbles will protect the polyphenols from getting absorbed in your stomach. So you'll miss out on about 80% of those polyphenols. They'll just trickle down through your gut and you won't get the benefit of them. If you drink straight coffee, you're going to get 100%, the whole test of all those polyphenols, because you don't have little soap bubbles. Or if you say, I got to cut my coffee with something, I can't stand the strength of coffee, then use a plant-based milk. Soy milk, nut milk, almond milk, totally fine. Those will actually not form those soap bubbles because it's animal fat, it's dairy that is doing it. Now we can talk about the myth around dairy as well, but that's about coffee. All right, I dodged the issue about mold. Molds are found in almost all of our foods. And in fact, by the way, I don't care if you're on the mountaintop in Colorado or Switzerland, or if you're in the middle of Mumbai, or New York City, you take a big breath in, okay, or Malibu, California, you're going to actually be breathing mold.
Yeah.
Mold, virus, fungi, bacteria, they're everywhere, okay? It's the microbial world around us. And for most people, it's not going to bother us. And if you've been drinking coffee and you haven't had a bad reaction and you don't actually break out and have all kinds of weird stuff, you're probably going to be just fine. Then the mold in our food, by the way, a different kind of mold is probably found on your apples or your pears or your walnuts. They're everywhere. It's everywhere. And I think people tend to label a demon. There's got to be mold somewhere. I'm going crazy. Listen, the best way to practice integrative medicine, okay, is to really not to be too quick to pass judgment and say one thing is causing all of your problems and all we got to do is knock that one thing out, because it usually doesn't work that way. So I would say for anybody listening, most coffee is just fine. If you drink it and you enjoy it, keep on enjoying it. Coffee is one of the three, I call it the holy trinity of beverages: water, tea, and coffee. All of them are good for hydration. Tea and coffee gives you polyphenols. Depending on the type of tea, for example, you also get dietary fiber. Coffee has a ton of bioactives as well. That's all good for you. And one of the things that I write about in my book about DNA is that drinking coffee has been shown to slow down cellular aging. So it actually slows down the burn rate of your telomeres so you don't age quite as quickly. That doesn't suck. That's a good thing. I always love my cup of coffee in the morning. I'm just telling people to feel comfortable drinking coffee.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for busting all these myths. And I feel so much lighter now. I can eat whatever I want pretty much, but it is amazing. I will have links in the show notes to get you the book, Eat to Beat Disease. This is such a great, you take deep dives. I mean, if people want to know exactly which tea and why and how and all the details, you will find it in the book. And you also have another book called Eat to Beat Your Diet, which is probably a whole other podcast, but I'll have links to your website, Instagram, Facebook. You're all over the place. So before I let you go, is there anything else is there something that's coming up, maybe program or another book or something you'd like to share with us?
I encourage people who like to get really practical advice to check out my YouTube channel. And my handle is at Dr. Dr. William Lee, Li. I look for my verified account, of course. There's a lot of imposters that are happening everywhere. But every week I release a new video that just talks about something practical, maybe a myth, maybe an area that we all want to be a little bit more clear on. And I give really practical tips. Subscribe, hit like, all the usual stuff. But that's really my outlet because my mission is to get good information out there. And I so appreciate, Zora, your invitation to come on to share some information with your audience.
Thank you. We're not done yet, so you're coming back. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks everyone who made it to the end of the podcast. You're obviously just as interested as I am in this topic. And please go and follow Dr. William Lee. That YouTube, those practical tips, these are things that you can do every single day because we can have the science and all that, but then you go, how do I do this? So thank you so much, Dr. Lee, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you.